The night sky was heavy with clouds, and the desert wind howled like a crying child. The old dirt road stretched endlessly under the fading light. Emma had been driving for hours, hoping to reach the next town before midnight. Her phone battery was almost dead, and the fuel gauge danced dangerously close to empty. She had taken the wrong turn miles ago, and now all she could see were dry bushes, the broken fence of an abandoned farm, and the dark outline of faraway hills. Her car coughed once, twice, and stopped. She turned the key again, but the engine only made a tired sound. Panic rose in her chest. She was alone in the middle of nowhere. The wind picked up, carrying dust that scratched her face as she stepped out. She wrapped her jacket tight and looked around, trying to see if there was any sign of life. A house, a gas station, anything. Nothing but silence. After a few minutes, she saw a faint light flickering in the distance. Maybe a lantern, maybe a campfire. Hope mixed with fear. What if it was someone dangerous? But she couldn't stay in the cold all night. So she began walking toward the light, each step crunching over gravel and dry grass. Her shoes filled with sand, and her heart beat faster with every sound she heard behind her. The wind moving through the trees, a lonely owl, her own breathing. As she got closer, she saw an old wooden house half broken with a small barn beside it. The light came from inside the barn. She slowly peeked through the open door. Inside, an old man sat near a lantern repairing a saddle. His long gray hair hung under a wide cowboy hat, and his clothes were dusty but clean. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "You lost, miss?" he asked in a deep, calm voice. Emma froze. She didn't know what to say. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "My car stopped. I can't get it to start. There's no signal here." The old man stood slowly, his movements careful as if he didn't want to scare her. "You're far from town." "About 12 miles west," he said. "I got a horse and an old truck. I can take a look at your car if you want." She hesitated. His eyes were kind but tired, and his wrinkled hands looked strong but gentle. Still, something in her heart warned her to be careful. She remembered stories her mother told her about trusting strangers. She took a small step back. "No, thank you. I'll just wait till morning." The old man nodded, not offended. "Suit yourself," he said. "But the desert gets cold at night. There's an old cabin by that tree trunk yonder. You can stay there if you're scared of coming inside." He pointed toward a large, twisted tree behind the barn. Its trunk was thick and old, and beside it stood a small wooden cabin that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Emma looked at it, dark, dusty, but still standing. She thought it might be better than sleeping in her car. She whispered a small "thank you" and walked toward it. Inside, the cabin smelled of dry wood and dust. She brushed away cobwebs and found an old blanket on the floor. As she wrapped herself in it, she could still see the light from the barn through the window. The old man was still working, quietly humming to himself. She wanted to trust him, but something about his silence made her uneasy. Hours passed. The wind grew stronger. The door of the cabin creaked again and again as if someone were pushing it from outside. She tried to stay calm, telling herself it was just the wind. But then she heard slow footsteps. Not the sound of the wind, not the rustle of trees, but heavy boots on the dirt. Her breath stopped. She looked through the small window and saw the shadow of the old man walking toward her cabin. She stood up quickly and pressed her back to the wall. The doorknob turned slightly, then stopped. "You okay in there, miss?" came his voice. "You're shivering. I brought you a lantern." Her fear and confusion mixed. She didn't know if he meant harm or kindness. "I'm fine," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Please don't come in." He didn't move for a moment. Then he said softly, "All right, but keep the blanket tight. Nights like this can be cruel." He placed the lantern by the door and walked away. The yellow light glowed faintly through the cracks. Emma waited, her body trembling, not from the cold but from the storm of thoughts in her head. What if he wasn't dangerous? What if she was just too afraid to see kindness? She wanted to believe the best, but fear always won. The night dragged on. The old man's barn light finally went out, and only the moonlight remained. Emma couldn't sleep. Every sound made her heart jump. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, and she hugged herself tighter. She thought about her family, her mistakes, and the strange road that had brought her here. Just before dawn, she heard something new, a distant rumble. She ran outside and saw smoke rising from the direction of her car. She gasped and started running. The old man appeared from behind the barn, calling after her. "Wait, it's not safe." But she didn't listen. The wind carried the smell of burning fuel. When she reached her car, the hood was smoking and flames flickered beneath it. She stepped back, afraid it would explode. Then she saw the old man coming toward her with a bucket of water. Together they threw sand and water until the fire died out. Emma fell to the ground, coughing. The old man handed her a bottle of water. "Looks like the engine overheated," he said. "You're lucky it didn't blow up." She looked at him, this man she had doubted all night, and suddenly felt a wave of guilt. He had only tried to help. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I thought you might hurt me." The old man gave a small smile. "Ain't the first time someone's feared me for the hat I wear," he said gently. "Out here folks learn to look tough, but not all tough faces hide bad hearts." Emma nodded, feeling ashamed. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything." He looked at her car, scratched his beard, and said, "We'll fix her up when the sun's higher. You can rest in the cabin till then." As the morning sun rose over the dry hills, Emma followed him back, her fear slowly melting into something else, trust. She noticed how carefully he walked, how he spoke only when needed, and how his old hands still worked with purpose. She began to wonder who he really was and what stories lived behind those quiet eyes. That morning she would learn something that would change how she saw him, and herself, forever. Morning light painted the desert in shades of gold and orange. The air was cool and birds called softly from the nearby trees. Emma sat outside the small cabin, wrapped in the same dusty blanket from the night before. The fear that had ruled her heart was now replaced with quiet curiosity. The old man was already awake, busy beside his barn, checking some rusty tools. His movements were slow but steady, filled with a kind of care she hadn't expected from a stranger. When he noticed her watching, he raised his hand in greeting. "Morning, miss," he said with a warm smile. "I checked your car. The radiator's cracked. Needs a patch before we can move it." Emma walked closer, brushing the dust from her jeans. "Can it be fixed?" she asked, her voice still small, as if she wasn't sure she had the right to speak after misjudging him. "It can," he said, looking at her kindly. "It'll take a few hours, maybe more, but I've fixed worse." He handed her a cup of hot tea from a small kettle he had set over a fire. The smell of herbs filled the air. She hesitated again before taking it, but this time she smiled. "Thank you," she said softly. They sat in silence for a while. The old man worked, and Emma watched the world slowly wake up. The dust swirling, the sun rising higher, and the endless stretch of land that looked both beautiful and lonely. She realized that even though she had been afraid of him, she was now grateful she wasn't alone anymore. After a while, she asked, "Do you live here all by yourself?" He paused before answering, tightening a bolt with his wrench. "Used to have a wife," he said quietly. "Lost her some years ago. My boy, too. Been on my own since then." Emma felt a small ache in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said. The old man nodded but didn't look up. "Life don't always give what you hope for, but it gives you enough to keep going." She sipped her tea, letting his words sink in. She thought about her own life, how she'd left her small town to chase a job in another city, hoping to prove herself. She had spent so long running after goals that she'd forgotten what peace even felt like. Maybe this breakdown, this unexpected night, was meant to slow her down. Hours passed, and they worked together. The old man showed her how to mix a sealant from an old bottle and sand. He explained how engines breathe like living things, needing rest and care. His hands were steady, his voice patient. For the first time, Emma laughed, really laughed, when he joked about his horse being smarter than his old truck. By noon, the car was ready. The engine coughed to life again, this time stronger, smoother. Emma clapped her hands in excitement. "You did it!" she said with a wide smile. He chuckled. "We did it," he corrected. "Takes two to fix something. One to hold the tools and one to hold the faith." His words made her pause. Faith. That was something she had been missing for a long time. In herself, in others, in the world. She turned to look at him. "You're a good man," she said honestly. "I shouldn't have doubted you." The old man gave her a long, gentle look. "You did what anyone would have done," he said. "The world's a rough place now. Folks don't trust easy, and maybe they shouldn't. But don't let fear be the only thing that guides you, miss. It'll steal your heart before any man can." His words felt like they came from a deep well of truth. She nodded, holding back tears. After they finished cleaning up, she packed her things. Her phone had charged a little using his old generator, and she saw a few missed messages from her mother asking if she was safe. She smiled and typed a quick reply. "I'm okay. Met someone kind." As she walked to her car, she turned back to thank him again. He stood near the barn, waving his hat slightly. "You take care now," he said. "Road ahead's smoother once you know where you're headed." She hesitated, then asked, "What's your name?" He smiled faintly. "Folks used to call me Jed, don't much hear it these days." "Thank you, Jed," she said softly. "For everything." She started the car and the engine purred. As she drove away, the rearview mirror showed Jed growing smaller in the distance, standing under the same tree that had sheltered her through the long night. The wind caught his coat, and for a moment he looked like a figure from another time, a memory of a world where kindness still lived quietly. The road stretched ahead, smooth and endless. Emma turned on the radio, letting soft music fill the car, but her mind kept going back to Jed, his quiet strength, his lonely eyes, and the way he had shown her that trust wasn't always foolish, and that goodness could still exist in the most forgotten corners of the earth. After about an hour, she reached a small town. She stopped at a cafe for breakfast. The place smelled of fresh coffee and bread. As she sat by the window, she couldn't help but notice the old photos on the wall. Black and white pictures of local ranchers, farmers, and cowboys from decades ago. Her eyes widened when she spotted one of the photos. There, in a picture dated 1979, stood a younger version of Jed, smiling proudly beside a horse and a woman holding a baby. The caption read, "Jed Carter, last of the Mesa Ranch Cowboys. Lost family in a storm 1984. Her heart tightened. So it was true. He had lived through deep loss but never let it turn him bitter. Instead, he chose to help a stranger lost in the desert. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were warm tears, the kind that come when sadness meets gratitude. She whispered to herself, "Thank you, Jed," and smiled faintly. When she left the cafe, she stopped by a small general store and bought a small wooden cross charm. On it, she carved 2 words, "For Jed." Then, before heading to her next destination, she drove back to the spot where she had met him. The barn was still there, but the place looked quieter now. The door was open, the tools still neatly arranged. She called out his name, but no one answered. Only the wind replied. On the wooden table inside the barn, she found something, a folded note written in careful handwriting. It said, "Didn't want to wake you this morning. My old horse needed walking. Thank you for the laughter, miss. Reminded me of better days. Keep your courage. Jed." She held the note close to her chest, smiling through tears. She placed the wooden charm on the table beside it and whispered a small prayer of thanks. Not just for Jed, but for the strange, broken night that had led her to someone who had changed the way she saw the world. When she got back in her car and drove off for the final time, the sun was high and the road shimmered with light. The desert no longer looked empty. It looked alive, full of stories and souls that refused to fade. And somewhere behind her, an old cowboy walked with his horse under the endless sky, smiling to himself, grateful that even in a lonely world, kindness still found a way to be remembered.